Good evening to our merry Marvelites. Welcome to Marvel Movie Talk on our new home over here on Geekscape. We're very excited to be here talking Marvel with you every week. Marvel movies, Marvel TV, Marvel comics. What a novel idea. More Marvel than you can shake a stick at. Although we were just talking before we started that you're going to have to shake a lot of sticks because there's going to be a little bit less Marvel. But in any case, very excited to talk today about Across the Spiderverse, also known as Spider-Verse 2 Electric Boogaloo. As always, I am Christian Bladt, also host of Geekscape Book Club right here on Geekscape. And a past guest on Geekscape Book Club is our friend Jordan Blum, who was showrunner for MODOK. He co-creator of Minor Threats, which make sure that you get a chance to tell people about some fun events coming up for Minor Threats, and Community, American Dad. And if I've left anything off, I apologize, but I think
good enough. Well, this is a Marvel podcast, so I've also written X-Men and Spider-Man stuff, Spider-Verse specifically stuff.
Right.
And a Venom thing coming out. We're doing Venomverse. Everything's getting a verse.
Yeah. And also with us is our friend Jeff Duray. Jeff Duray, I'm looking in your notes. Your big credit is Jeff Duray of the Black Cast. And I believe that is hosted by a very talented and handsome host named Christian Bladt, unless I'm mistaken.
I'm also pitching Spiderverse.
The Spiderverse,
mad shared universe.
Let me just add on to that the Spiderverse, which that was the female spy that also fought both the white spy and the black spy. So we've done it. I think we've basically created the whole Spiderverse. Jordan, it's a good place to start because your Spiderverse story, you got to create some characters who weren't in this movie, but we have another one coming, right?
I assume they're holding Pete Spiderman, the Spider-Man, from my comic for the next one. I have to assume so.
Yeah, well, I think Peter Parker took his moment in the movie, and as someone who was always baffled by the fact that the Spider-Mobile existed, I was glad it got a shout out. That was before my time in reading comics, but I remember reading in back issues. I think they had the Spider-Mobile for 6 months, and then it promptly got crashed into the East River. But I want to talk big picture on Spider-Verse. Jordan, let's just talk about, obviously, it's very easy to remember just 5 short years ago, the first Spider-Verse was amazing. It was groundbreaking in so many ways. The bar was set very high. For me personally, this is one of those times where the high bar didn't result in being let down. What are your thoughts on Across the Spider-Verse?
100% it delivered on all fronts. And I think, visually, it just pushed animation forward in a way we've never seen before. The story was fantastic. For me, I think I connected maybe emotionally more to the first one. And then this one felt like, it felt like the Back to the Future 2 there's even plot points that are very similar to Back to the Future 2, but as far as kind of doubling down on the first movie and pushing it further, and it being a bigger adventure and romp, that's definitely reminded me of Back to the Future 2. So it gave me everything I wanted. I love the focus being on Gwen just as much as Miles. I have my own little tiny Spider-Man nitpicks, but on a whole, it's a near perfect movie. I would say the third best Spider-Man movie.
Well, obviously, number one would be Spider-Man 3, the one with Topher Grace's Venom. Right. That's kind of a given.
Not as bad as people remember it to be.
No, I rewatched it at one point, and there was a lot of things that I didn't like. But there are some sequences that I think worked really well. What about you, Jeff? Your thoughts? Your expectations going in, and then your thoughts after you actually saw Spider-Verse. Across the Spider-Verse.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I loved the first one. I think everybody did. I don't know anybody who didn't like it. And so, definitely.
Yeah, and I'll just interject. You and I do a show with someone who kind of doesn't like anything. Even he liked it. So, that's how you know.
I think the first one holds a special place for me, at least, because it was so unexpectedly good. Like, you expected to enjoy it. I expected like that this would be interesting, but just remember being blown away because of how many original, interesting ideas that they had in that movie that just made it really like stick with you. I think it's awesome that, like Jordan said, they kind of doubled down on some of those things. Like the art direction in this movie is just unbelievable. Just the subtle things that they do with color, or even just like the styles of art in the universes to express the emotions that people are going through. I think it's like really, really well done, really creative. The story was really interesting. I think if there's a knock, which I don't think is a knock at all, it's that this feels less like your downbeat for the two-parters, right? Like a lot of times when you have these two-parts like endings of the trilogy, the ending of the second movie feels like an ending more so, like feels like okay, we're gonna take a little time before we come back to this. This felt more like we're in the middle of something and then we had to end it because like it was just gonna go on too long. So just from a story structure, it felt less like a cliffhanger, but at the same time, it's just like, I guess it just makes me feel like the story's incomplete, which it intentionally is. So it's harder to judge it in that way. But otherwise, it's just like you said, a near perfect movie. Really, really.
Yeah,
good.
that was the same feeling I had, was that I feel like when we've had part 3 and I can kind of look at where it all went, it's easier to look at. Not to say that, you know, there's anything wrong with this, but there was that feeling because I knew there was a follow-up. I just didn't realize this was like a cliffhanger kind of ending. But you have to appreciate it because it's a very comic booky ending, because you know, even your big comic book events, usually there's like, oh yeah, but now it's going to get even worse. You know, like the last like 2 pages, something crazy comes out, you know? So I think that it was fun. And yeah, there's the comparison that, you know, it's funny, Jordan, that you mentioned Back to the Future too, because I always was like, oh no, this is really just, that never felt like an ending. And I sort of like the third one more. My hot take that as a child, I stick with it. I love Return of the Jedi because it's the ending. And I'm still the 7-year-old that saw it in the theater for the first time. But I have no complaints about this other than, why does it have to be 9 more months? You know, why couldn't it have been like next month that it comes out? Just because I want to see where it goes. But I think they did a great job setting it up, and they give us plenty of time to rewatch it. Talk a little bit about, from a story standpoint, Jordan. Obviously, you do run a risk by giving people an ending like that, but I don't think they missed the mark at all. I think giving us this, oh no, what's going to happen next, is actually a great thing.
Yeah, because I completely forgot they had split it into 2 movies.
Yes,
So when we got
exactly.
there and we're getting towards the end, I was like, how are they gonna wrap this up soon? Like, there seems like a lot building. So I was like, oh, good. There's more. They can take their time. They can explore it because there's so much kind of crammed into this movie. And I think some people have said it as a complaint that it's a maximalist movie, but I think that's one of its strengths, is that these guys are so good at cramming in visuals and layering visuals and dialogue, and people are talking over each other, that it's an incredibly rewarding rewatch. But I was never confused of where to look or what to follow, even in these kind of busier frames and big action moments. So I think that's like incredible direction for that to come across when you have such a rich, layered movie. But I think, you know, it definitely is more of the downbeat, right? Empire Strikes Back, you know, we're ending in a really bad place for Miles. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. To me, it was more the characters and the moments and the worlds, like going to what was it? Mumbattan? Was that what they were? What it's called?
Yeah.
Like, I could have done a whole movie there. Spider Punk, I could have gone off and watched him. Every tiny moment with Gwen and her dad and the dripping colors and the changing colors of that world, like, you just wanted to live in it, like every scene. So that's a very hard thing to pull off. I think it is a very busy script in the best way. They're servicing a ton of characters. They're introducing people like Spider-Man 2099 and all these other new characters. But they don't lose sight of the emotional stakes and, very clearly kind of introduce all these other new Spider-Man. So I don't know. It's one of those things where you sit back and you're like, I don't know how anyone writes or directs this, but I can't believe it worked, and it's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, to keep the continuity for all the different spider people that pop in. And along with that theme, we're now having a fourth join. Our fourth Musketeer is joining us here in our multiverse, in our Spider-Verse. Kaitlin Cornell. Kaitlin,
Hello.
thank you for joining us here. And let's throw it right at you. Let's talk about sort of the big overall thoughts of this movie, the way that it kind of hits us right up until the point that it ends, and it's like, well, you're gonna have to come back in 9 months. Share your thoughts with us.
I think this is one of the smartest movies I've seen in a very long time. It's a movie that knew exactly what it wanted to do. It's a movie that was able to be creative and take what they had started with Into the Spider-Verse and turn it up in a way that was not just, we're giving you fan service and we're giving you shiny keys to look at. Everything made sense and everything had a purpose within the narrative and within the story and within what made Spider-Man so meaningful to so many people throughout his iterations. I like that Spider-Man's sense of humor and his quippy witticism was still consistent throughout all the characters, even 2099. Even though he was probably the most serious one, I still laughed at what he was saying and how Oscar Isaac was directed. And I thought this is going to sound weird, the vocal layering was interesting. Like there was always somebody like in the background talking and you're just like, wait, what do they say? Like it was
Love
very that. The amount of work they put into the visuals, they're like, we're going to put just as much into the sound. Whether it's the audio track, whether it's the sound effects, whether it's the music. I thought it was a very well done film. And I thought that I hope we're going to talk about the villain switch later because we need to talk about the villain switch.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because what you're talking about, obviously, you can make a great big movie like this and utilize the Dolby surround sound, and you can really kind of do that. And so this movie, as you said, does that. And of course, like, yes, like you said before, Jordan, where to focus your eyes on, but on subsequent watchings, you're like, oh, look at all this other stuff that I didn't get to look at. I mean, we were talking about this last week or the last time, and it's just like, if there's ever a movie to be excited to, get that Blu-ray at home, and actually it's almost like you want to watch it frame by frame because there's so much to look at. Yeah. Jeff, I wanted to kind of get your thoughts to follow up on that idea about the sort of the way that it ends, but also just sort of what it delivers in that 2 hours and 20 minutes of runtime. I had started to have that same feeling Jordan did, that I was like, I wonder if it's gonna be hard to wrap up, but the movie kept me interested the whole time. I didn't have a great sense for how much time was left, and then I was like, got to start winding it up at some point, don't they? What did you think, Jeff?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It sounds like at least the three of us had the same thought. I don't know if you had it too, where I just remember hitting a point in the movie being like, I have no idea what time it is, like how far into this movie I am. I don't know, like, are we close to the end? Are we in the middle? Like, I had no real sense of time. And I didn't think it was like a pacing issue. It just felt like you don't have that, normal, like, all right, we're going up the roller coaster, getting ready, and all right, and here's the end. Because it was really just like, oh no, we're just in the middle of this. We're just going to keep going and going. It feels like reading a book where it's just like, you don't have like the really obvious pacing that you do in a movie. Like, you're like, all right, you got about 20 minutes to get us to the climax. Let's go. What was the other question you had?
Well, just sort of, kind of anything really in terms of the different, that we're talking about the audio layers, but the visual layers. There's so much to look at. There's so much to listen to. I mean, it is really just one of those movies that you just soak in with all your senses.
Yeah.
And and knowing how much you like popcorn, taste being one of those senses that you were able to soak it in. So
definitely, I think it's. I think Jordan said this before, that it's a movie that's infinitely rewatchable. Right, like each time you watch it, you could take away more things, more little side notes you missed, or like a dialogue box you didn't quite pick up on. I think one of the things that I just remembered that made no sense to me is I don't understand why they changed his dad's name from the first movie. So his dad's name in the first movie is Jefferson Davis, which is his normal dad's name, and in this movie it was Jeff Morales. So that just didn't really make any sense to me. I never understood why they felt the need to change his name in this movie. And there was another part that this just reminded me that made no sense, where when they're having that rooftop party, it seemed like maybe through the process of editing, it got really kind of fucked up there, because it's like the party's happening, then he's out of the party, then he's off all around the city, then he's just hanging out with Gwen alone under the thing, then the party's still happening and his parents are there, then the party's not happening and Gwen leaves, and then the party's still happening in the background when he's talking to his parents. It was like, I don't know if they were trying to like change angles, but I just remember being like really confused as to like what the timing of all that was meant to be.
I feel like it was the same moment. I've seen it 3 times already, and you can still hear the party happening in the background when he and Gwen are underneath the little thingy thing.
They just show it empty. They show the rooftop empty.
That's interesting.
Do they? Well,
they're
stealing food.
That's what I'm saying.
And
like
so
they're having the party,
and so the parents are like looking, going like, I bet she doesn't speak Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
Is that section you're talking about? Where
so then they go over to talk to him, and then when they're talking with him and the parents, like the view that you can see of the rest of the roof is like empty from that angle. It could have just been that like it was a weird angle and I got confused, and like the spatial reasoning was like confusing me. But I remember watching that and being like, what's happening here? Like, why are people appearing and disappearing?
I'll have to watch it again to take that part in. But the Jefferson Davis part is pretty easy. I feel like it's kind of like how in the last season of I Love Lucy, all of a sudden Ricky Ricardo was Dominican. He wasn't Cuban anymore just because the world changed. And maybe they were just like, you know what? We don't need the president of the Confederacy. Maybe that's a no.
You mess with the multiverse long enough, there's going to be changes.
It's a great point. You mess around enough, all of a sudden you wake up one day and your name's something different. But if you want, Jeff, instead of calling you Jeff Duray, I'll call you Jefferson Duray from here on in. So I think that would work. I do want to talk about go ahead.
Go ahead. If we're picking nits a little bit, again, love the movie. These are only minor little things that are more my weird Spider-Man stuff and less like everything in the narrative makes sense for the movie kind of thing. That's my preface here. But I found it weird that Captain Stacy became such an important part of this, that everyone has a captain kind of thing, because Gwen Stacy's death is the big thing in Spider-Man, not Captain Stacy's death.
Yeah.
But obviously when you have Spider-Gwen, you had to change that. So I understand why they did that, but my Spider-Man fan brain's like, this doesn't ring true to me. Like Captain Stacy's death means nothing kind of in the comics. It's kind of a throwaway story. It's not a big canon moment, for the characters. But I get why they changed that. And I also had a hard time buying Peter going along with the plan, letting people die. Like, that's so antithetical to Peter Parker, who is like, I'll save everyone and I don't care and there's always a way. But this is Miles' movie and Miles should have that part. So I totally understand why they changed that, but it rubbed me a little the wrong way as a Peter fan, a comic book Peter fan.
That doesn't feel like, you'd feel like at least a few of the Peters, and the one that would probably be the most likely would be Peter B. Parker. He seems to be the one that's most like the Peter that, we would all know, from the comics. But, and I think we start to see at least those twinges of that towards the end of the movie. But I agree with you. It's not consistent with Peter Parker to think that he'd be like, well, if you say it's for the greater good, I guess people got to die. You know, it's like kind of like
Yeah.
the opposite of the way
Unless
you think
it's
of
like
it.
like having a daughter changes your perspective a little bit, maybe too. You know.
Well, I don't know. I have a daughter, and I don't want any Spider-Men to die. I want them all to live forever. The topic of the villain came up earlier, and for our visual audience, you can see the image from, I believe this is Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, number 97, which the Spot was like the first year I was reading comic books. He was a new character, and I thought he was kind of cool. He is sort of goofy, and I think that they did something great with that, and they really kind of turned into the fact that Miles dismisses him, and he's like, "Oh, I'll show you." And boy, he really does kind of show us what he's capable of. Kate, that seemed to be something that caught you upon 3 viewing. So why don't we start with Spot?
So good. Also, thank you, Google. Figured out that Jefferson Morales thing.
Oh, okay. Well, what did Google say?
Google
I hope that this
says-
is a real answer and not an AI answer.
Well, it's from Comic Basics, and they changed the name from they're treating it in the comics like Miles Morales took his mother's name.
Okay.
And so they adjusted around the fan backlash because they were trying to connect Jeff Davis to Aaron Davis. So in 2019, they had Jeff Morales take his wife's surname instead of keeping his own. So the movie reflected that change.
Okay. Well,
so it's a change that happened in the comics.
I appreciated
that.
being able to make
Cool.
my Ricky Ricardo footnote all the same. So,
Yeah.
But let's talk Spot.
Let's talk Spot. One, Jason Schwartzman is a treasure, and he must be protected at all costs.
Agreed.
I also love the fact that I think one of the animator that pitched when into the Spider-Verse, when he gets a bagel thrown at him and it just says bagel. I love that has now become like the origin story for like the scariest villain in Spider-Man. Because he's like, that would be funny, and he just did it. I like the idea of the underdog villain, and normally in like basic ass screenwriting, there's like 5 pieces. Like there's the protagonist, the love interest, the sidekick, the villain, and the obstacle, the thing that keeps getting in the way of the protagonist defeating the villain, whether it's a thematic villain or a real life one. And this is the first movie I've seen. Please tell me if there are other ones, because I thought this was a really interesting switch of we've gone through this process with Spot of him becoming the main villain, and 2099 being the obstacle to him saving his father from Spot, and the kind of rise of this villain that he wasn't an overpowered villain when he started. They're both rising kind of together at in an exponential rate. But this is the first time I've seen a movie where by the end of the film, the obstacle and the villain have switched places. So now like 2099 and the idea of canon and the idea of story, the actual story of Spider-Man being the villain, is now the main villain, and the obstacle is going to be Spot. Like it's going to be like they're constantly going to be getting in each other's way in order to make the story happen or not happen.
Well, that's an interesting way to look at it. It's almost like Spot is the foregone conclusion. Like, yeah, they'll figure it out, but how is he going to take on, thousands of spider people, or at least 5?
Or the idea of your own, can you change your own story? And a bunch of people saying you can't because this is what makes us who we are.
Right.
Spot's story also kind of mimics Miles in a lot of way from the first one, where it's like Miles is clumsy, he trips over a shoe, and that's how he breaks the goober, and where Spot kicks himself in the butt, and that's how he figures out he can travel dimensions. So it's like, in a lot of way, this was his rise to power, like the first one's Miles is.
Yeah, Jordan, give us your thoughts on how they were able to kind of do what Kate's talking about. One, you take a very slight character, and without him, like saying, merging with Venom or something, so there's not that reason that all of a sudden he becomes this big. He basically powers himself up, and he rises to sort of this like ultimate threat that impacts the entire Spider-Verse.
I love that. I think it's like a Marvel Universe thing where every day, you see a lot of normal everyday people get superpowers, become heroes, and this is again, an underdog, normal person with this insane cosmic level power that he doesn't quite understand. And then once he figures it out, driven, like you said, the same kind of motivation of Miles, I'm going to prove myself. Everyone underestimates me. Here's my shot, that he powers up. And then he's I like that we don't really get much of him towards the end of the movie. He's kind of this gun on the shelf that we're going to see come back later, and like you said, this one is more about, it's all about Miles wanting to be part of something, wanting to be part of this group, wanting to be part of this team. And then that rejection specifically by, Spider-Man 2099 saying, you can never be a part of this. That's what this movie's about. And I think that's where the focus shift happens. That, this is about Miles going, I don't need to be a part of a group, even though that's all he's been waiting for, is to find his people, get out in the world, figure out who he is. And he thinks who he is part of this spider team, only to find out that they don't want him. And he's this anomaly, and all the people he trusted, he can't trust. They were, working behind his back, even the characters we really like. So I think it's a really nice arc where you set the Spot off on a similar kind of villainous arc that mirrors Miles, but Miles gets to have his with Spider-Man 29 in this film. But look, I love, me, I love D-list villains. Spider-Man has some of the best, and it was also really refreshing to kind of dip into that catalog, because usually you only get Sinister Six level villains in Spider-Man movies. And here we get some of the, goofier ones, and I love those characters. So I was really excited to see.
Yeah, occasionally you like a visit from Paste Pot Pete, and obviously your show MODOK featured one of my favorite D-list villains, Armadillo, from like the early.
My God, that's right.
And the early too.
And what's that?
He was in Spiderverse too.
Oh yeah, right, exactly.
Where he stops the train. Yeah.
Yeah. And my favorite, I talked about this in an earlier conversation, but was one of those isolated characters was Video Man, who's from, I think, the first episode of Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. Electro creates this character. So it's like, it's such like a very, very slight, very inside. They're not afraid to do that. There's the really obvious ones. Like we get Spider-Man 67 swinging in there, and we have footage of both Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, and we're getting so many, but I love that there's times for some of the other ones. What were you going to say, Jeff?
Just realizing from what Jordan was saying that there's kind of an inversion again from the first movie of Miles. In the beginning of the first movie, he's constantly feeling like an outsider, like he feels accepted in Brooklyn, but he doesn't feel accepted in Visions, and he's having problems in the community, right? He's like almost getting hit by the taxi, and then by the end it's like, hey, what's up, Spider-Man? Oh, we're all friends, we love you. So it's like it's that acceptance. He wanted it and he got it, and now he wants it again, but realizing he doesn't need it. So it's kind of flipping that from the first film.
Is it acceptance, or is it validation that he is a good enough Spider-Man to be part of a team? So by him saying, no, I'm going to do my own thing, it's, I don't need your validation of if I'm Spider-Man or not.
Could be both.
I think it's a mixture of both.
Yeah.
Because he's, if you're looking at just the structure of this film, right, he's talking about leaving home, and he's missing Gwen, and he's upset that no one's come to visit him, right? So when he learns about this team, his goal is to get on it, and that's the goal halfway through the movie.
Right.
And then he finally, I want to get to this place you all, function as a team and join. And then it turns into the nightmare, right? It's the fake goal. He gets there, and it's not what he thought. And literally everyone who he trusted has been in on this kind of conspiracy to keep him out. And it's that moment of betrayal where he goes, no, I'm going to do things my way, and I think it's that refusal of the goal, right? That initial goal that he's grown into a different character that sends him on, to the rest of the movie, and then into the final one as well. So I think that's a really well structured kind of idea of that being Miles' goal from kind of minute one to about halfway through the movie, until he has that kind of fight with Spider-Man 2099 and kind of really discovers what's going on. Because
that's going to be final. I mean, that's going to be boss fight, honestly, is going to be, because the thing is, like, by the end of this movie, we kind of know everything we need to know about Spot. Like in actuality, we know his origin story, we know his motivations, we know what he wants. And like by the end of the movie, the second we hit Spider Society, I'm like, there's gonna be a third movie. Like
Yeah.
I'm like, this movie's too long now. And then how much mystery is surrounding the motivations of Miguel O'Hara, who I think was expertly played by Oscar Isaac. It's really hard to get that balance, and well written and well directed. And it's hard to get that balance between like still Spider-Man humor, still amusing, still but like very much like there's a guarded aspect to him, and the need to be in charge and the need to have things under control. And what his motivations are is a complete mystery, because he technically didn't cause prevent a canon event. He took someone else's like universe. like that's incredible. So he's not completely telling the truth.
Yeah, that I was thinking about this the first time we were talking about it, and I realized that obviously, Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099, he's the Don Draper of Spider-Man. He literally, it's the same story.
God,
he sneaks in and he's like, "Well, this is me now," and I think it's interesting because
the slow draft.
He's the guy who steals basically a Spider-Man's life, and this idea that Miles, I think it's great for the character. It really builds him up as so unique. Is like, look, there's all these hundreds, thousands of universes. This is the only one where you're Spider-Man because you're not supposed to be Spider-Man. And I think it works so well because this is a character this isn't just another Peter Parker. If you had a Peter Parker that wasn't supposed to be Spider-Man, yeah, sure, you can tell that story, but it's like, well, this is a different kid, and nowhere else this kid exists in other ones, obviously, as we'll talk about as we see towards the end. So I think just making him that much more of an outsider. I wanted to ask your thoughts on that, Jeff, because you were in early on Miles Morales. I was definitely an old guard, dragging my feet. I loved me some Peter Parker, and I still do. But the first Spider-Verse movie, I've said before, really was the great way to get people who already love Miles, and then the old get off my lawn guys like me who are like, yeah, but Peter Parker Spider-Man's like, yeah, but so is Miles. I'm like, okay, yeah, you're right. But what did you think about the way that it's really Miles versus the universe in this, Jefferson? Sorry.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Well, I think it's interesting because it's like you can't say that Miles isn't meant to be Spider-Man, just that Miles wasn't. The other Earth or 42 Miles is supposed to be Spider-Man.
Right.
And because he didn't become Spider-Man, he became the Prowler. So I think that's obviously like an interesting, I think exploring that, like what outside of just not getting special powers, but like, is the inflection point that his dad's gone? Is the inflection point that when he lost his dad, there was nothing he could do about it, so he just broke bad? Like what makes that what makes Miles, that is the Prowler at the end of the movie, the Prowler? Like what motivated him to want to do that? Because if he's the Prowler, then obviously he's not just following in his uncle's footsteps, because his uncle would be the Prowler and he'd be like Prowler Jr. or something.
Captain Caveman and son.
I love the Miles Morales Spider-Man. I think it's great that it's like, Spider-Man has been around long enough that I think it's I don't understand why they would distance him from Aaron Davis. That doesn't make any sense to me, but I don't make those decisions, because I loved the fact that it was like this Spider-Man was so much more of our generation. He had unmarried parents. He took his mom's name. He's just like a totally different kid with totally different motivations. And that's what made him so interesting, because it didn't have to just be parallel universe Spider-Man. It was like, hey, this is somebody who could be influenced by a Spider-Man. So like, what would Spider-Man mean to other people who need that empowerment? And that's what I always thought of Miles as, at least in like the early stories where Spider-Man's still alive with him.
Jordan, I'm not sure. Have you written Miles stories, or have you mostly written Peter stories? Because I'm wondering if you
wrote one.
Okay.
Yeah, I wrote one Miles thing. It was for the Spider Bots kind of kid stories I was doing for the app. But I got to write him, which was awesome. Yeah, I look at my own kids. I have two boys, and Miles is their Spider-Man, and I love that. Like, I love that everyone can have their Spider-Man, and also like maybe Miles will be the prime Spider-Man and you sunset Peter in the future, and like that's fine too. I'm a huge Wally West fan, and I don't care for Barry Allen, but I know a lot of people like Barry Allen, so I think
do we have a friend we should introduce you to?
Oh God.
Our friend Will Sterling talks all the time about how
Oh,
much he
God.
doesn't like Barry Allen, and real life issues with an actor gave DC an opportunity to just bring Wally in. But anyway, that's a conversation for another time. I think you're right. And by the way, just to add in, I have a son and a daughter, and my daughter has her Spidey too. As I've talked about, she's 5, so she loves the Disney Junior show Spidey and His Amazing Friends.
Yep.
And Ghosty, Ghost Spider, she calls her Ghosty. They call her Ghosty on the show. So that's like, so you get to have, like, everybody gets to have a Spider-Man, and maybe that's the point of this movie, because even a horse, even Mr. Ed can be like, oh look, there's one for me.
Peter Parker.
But my question was, do you, and you said you wrote one thing. Do you feel like writing Miles is a lot different from writing Peter? It seems like fundamentally there are a lot of things in common, like their heart is kind of in the same place. But what do you think might be the biggest difference between the two of them, obviously, despite their physical appearance?
Well, I think Miles being younger, the family is a much bigger presence. Like, I always found as Peter gets older, it's a little hard to be like, Aunt May, I'm going to let Aunt May down again. Like, well, you're in your 30s. You should have a life outside of Aunt May.
Well, that's true. That in the mid 80s, it was a major plot point that Aunt May didn't like that he dropped out of grad school. And it was like, all right, but it's grad school, you're like 27. Yeah. It's okay.
You know what, Peter, make your own choices. Don't worry about Aunt May. But I love, this Miles is also very tied to his community, which I think is really neat. And I think a lot of the stories come out of that. Him being the Spider-Man of Brooklyn is so fun. I think what the biggest difference is he's a legacy character, even though he's carving out his own destiny. And that's what this movie's about, right? Is feeling the weight of legacy of other Spider-Men, and am I good enough? Am I going to live up to that? And Peter never had that. So I think that's a fundamental difference, which is, similar to Wally West and Barry, where you have, this godlike, hero who's already done this, and you're aware of him and you're trying to do it. And the more you try to be like this other Spider-Man, the more you're going to fail until you do things your way and you carve out your own destiny. So I think that's the fun of Miles, is a little bit of that burden and that arc of learning to be your own hero.
Right.
Kate, give us your thoughts about sort of their, obviously similarities between Peter and Miles, but some of the very distinct differences from Miles that we see, in both of these movies, and one day all 3 of these movies.
I mean, I guess it depends on which Peter we're talking about.
Yeah, I'm thinking of like sort of our classic impression of Peter. Yeah, like think of even Tom Holland, comic book Peter, the way we think of Peter.
Here's the weird thing is I think that especially the first movie and a little bit in Pav, they were kind of making fun of the Marvelized, the Marvel Cinematic Universe version of Peter Parker. And not like making fun of, but just like this idea of this like almost OP Spider-Man. Like he's got everything under control. He's like smart. He's witty. He's got it going on. He's got the girl. Like, you know what I mean? Like he's got it all on lockdown. And I think what we liked about like Tobey Maguire's version of Spider-Man is that he didn't have it all together. And then we kind of liked the overcorrection in the Andrew Garfield of like, yeah, but he's like still a ladies' man, and he still is very funny and he's very witty. And so Tom Holland was able to kind of balance the two of them together. But it took in reality, like 5 movies for him to lose Aunt May and have that like kind of like sense of that loss that we know of and sacrifice that we know of from Spider-Man. I think the difference between Peter Parker as we know Peter Parker as a character, and just putting up Miles Morales against the other Peter Parkers in the Spiderverse, is that there is a sense of loss and sacrifice that comes with that character and keeps it moving forward. And there's almost a weight that gets added to Peter Parker. And Miles doesn't feel... I'm not going to say he doesn't feel that weight, but the weight is expected. It's almost like because he's of how he's grown up and how he was raised and how family oriented he is and where he comes from. It's like, yeah, you pick it up and you can do both. Like you can do whatever, like you just keep going because you kind of have to. And there's this kind of creative aspect of, you know, I'm going to just figure it out. I can do both. I can be Spider-Man and I can be. Keep going.
I was going to say, you made me just think of you saying that is that Peter is closer to, let's say, Bruce Wayne, right? There's a tragedy that drives him that you can be a hero. And Miles is much closer to Superman in that he just had really good parents who raised a good kid who's going to do the right thing. That's what you just made me think of. So I think you unlocked it completely. Yeah.
And it's something of why I'm not actually sure. I want to double check that. But if I trust you who have read the Miles Morales canon, that that Earth 42 Miles Morales was supposed to be Spider-Man in that universe, because I think what that showed at the end was if you don't have a hero to look up to and if you're not given that opportunity and you're not given the support either at home or in your community, you could either become a Spider-Man or you could become a Prowler. That Miles Morales can become the villain or the hero, and Miles as a what is that word that I'm looking for? That metaphor for all kids of that generation, of the younger generation behind us, of you can be the hero or the villain depending on how much support you get and how much love and care and nurturing you actually have, how much opportunity you're able to have, how many heroes you're able to actually talk to, who you can look up to and who you can get in contact with. So I think that was the important part of that story.
Look at the difference between Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch when their dad is the guy who's literally in charge of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. They're not good eggs, but then they start getting hugs and people telling them nice things, and then they're like two of the most beloved Avengers, at least in the comics. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of exploration of Spidey nature versus nurture. One of the things I want to make sure that I ask everybody is we've kind of touched on some of the great Spider characters that we got. Was there a favorite for each of you? And was it anybody that surprised you? For me, it was definitely the Indian Spider-Man, Mumbattan. That was just like, just give me a well, it wouldn't be Disney Plus because it's Sony, but whatever. Give me a standalone movie or a miniseries of that. Jordan, I'll ask you first. Was there anybody that you were like, you might have even said it earlier, but is there somebody that stands far above everyone else of like, this is the character I most want to see more of? I'd love solo stories.
Well, I think Spider-Punk stole it, but I loved Scarlet Spider-Man. Scarlet Spider, not Spider-Man.
Andy Samberg.
And he looked like a Tom Lyle drawing right out of the comic. So
Ben O'Reilly? Was it Ben O'Reilly?
Just Ben Reilly.
Ben Reilly.
O'Reilly. Yeah, I think Andy Samberg. Look, I'm not a huge fan of the Ben Reilly character. I've said before, but they've definitely put a very specific stink on him, and now he's kind of never going to have a chance. But it was really funny, and I did really like it. And I could see Andy Samberg working his way through that. What about you, Jeff? Was there one that really stood out as it doesn't necessarily have to be a Spider-Man, but was there a character that really surprised you in this movie that really kind of stood out?
I don't know if one stood out or surprised me, but the one that immediately jumped to mind when you asked the question was the T-Rex Spider-Man with the T-Whip. I loved that, the little, when he did it, the thwip, and it was T-Whip.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah. No,
it's
definitely.
So quick. It's a blink and you miss it.
What about you, Kate? Is there an ultimate favorite? Although Ultimate Universe is something totally different, but was there one that really stood out for you amongst this that we got to spend time with that you'd love to revisit given more chance?
I mean, honestly, okay. This is just, I'm a little torn because I would love the side story of Spider-Punk capturing Donald Glover. Love that. just
Yeah.
because I want it. But also I would love to spend, I love the idea. Spider-Punk was an interesting addition to this tale. One, he was animated at different frame rates, so his body is not actually animated in the same pace as everybody else. Even like different parts of him, especially his jacket, you can see keeps changing, which is really great. And then the more he gets in tune with everybody else, the more it like kind of starts to sync up. And I have a theory that it wasn't, when he mentions like I got to look after my drummer, that it's not Spider-Gwen he's talking about, that it's Miles. Because the second that Miles is like, I'm out of here, because I've never had this experience in a theater, because I've had people like clap in a theater, but when the first thing he says to Miles is you have to use your whole palm,
Yeah.
and then he gets trapped in that thing. I was there like Thursday opening night, IMAX. I have never seen, like, there was like 4 rows of people and they all just went like this. Like they all just put their hands up.
Nice.
They're just like, use your palm. And like, I think like knowing that like the second like Miles started running and Spider-Punk is like, I'm out, peace, done, got it, saved him, he's fine. But I also secretly, because I love cats, I want Spider-Cat. I want a Spider-Cat spinoff. So
yeah,
Reese is being stupid.
Yeah, I definitely feel that I'm glad we got to see that it'll be in the next one, but I've always been a big Spider-Ham fan, and I thought that Mulaney did a great job in the first one, but we're gonna get him back. But
and Spider-Noir's back too. Nick Cage is back.
Right, Nick Cage will be back. That was the thing that surprised me the most about the first one, was the fact that we actually got Spider-Ham, and it'll be interesting to see what else we might get in the next one. Maybe they're saving Tom Holland for some reason. Maybe we will see him.
What did you think about? Wait, pause, time out.
Sure.
What did you guys think about them renaming?
Zach Morris over here. I'm sorry. What?
Sorry, no. I've been dying to ask this question to people who like understand. What did you think about them renaming the MCU as Earth 199999, as opposed to what they did, which was War 616?
Correct.
Yeah, because the 19999 is correct. They said 616 in Multiverse of Madness, but the 616 is the comic book one. I don't know what I think. I feel MCU like Jordan, you seem to have this. You seem to have this better formed in your head than I do. But the 199999 that is the MCU,
the comics
correct?
have always been. Yeah, the comics have always been 616, and then that was designated to the movie verse when it came, the MCU when it came out. And there is a guy at Marvel who has a whole Excel sheet of all the universes for everything, and I got to add the MODOK one in there. Was my son's birthday, so we got to kind of pick our universe. But yes, and the actress who plays Ms. Marvel corrects Feige all the time and says, "No, this is
she's
not
a nerd."
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I love her so much.
She's great. Yeah. So I think that
at the end of the day, 616 is just a number Alan Moore came up with one day. Like it doesn't really mean anything. It was from like a Captain Britain comic.
Yeah, but does anybody want to tell Alan Moore that they've changed something that he wrote? So it's just easier to just stick with it.
But when we're discussing the whole idea of like what is canon and what isn't canon, and narrative is like, how many times did like Lord Miller or people at Sony like, you can't use that because of this thing, because you have to, all Spider-Man stories have to start with the death of Uncle Owen, or Uncle Ben. Sorry, Star Wars. I've been in the Star Wars space.
Well, you look, if you wanted to make the case that Luke Skywalker is also a Peter Parker, I'd be willing to listen to it.
I mean, he kind of is though, like for real.
Well, he's also a Disney character. It makes sense that they bought both properties.
I mean, don't they kill his uncle and
they do kill his uncle?
He's like, I guess I got to go get some powers now.
He was just like, nah, I'm just gonna stick around. I can't go on your mission. I got so much to stay home for. Okay, I guess they're on fire. So let's head off to
the original plot armor. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen.
So as we start to wind down and we look ahead, 9 very long months, what do you hope? This might even just be something that you don't think we're actually going to get, but what do you hope the feeling is after the next part? Is there a Spider character that you'd like to see? Is there a moment you'd like to see? I'll ask you first, Jeff.
I mean, Spider character, I don't know. All of them, right? That's an impossible question. I don't know what Spider character I want to see. I want to see Miles Morales, obviously.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. It's impossible.
No, not even two of them.
Not even two of them.
I don't know what the feeling from the next one. What a open-ended question. I don't even know how to answer that. I guess.
Do you think that they've done a lot of good setup? Do you think that I don't have a problem with Back to the Future 3, but a lot of people do. So do you think they're going to Back to the Future 3 this movie?
No, I think they're going to stick the landing.
I don't think
because
so.
Again, I think
when
I think one of the things where I complained about the pacing is why I trust that they're going to nail the next one, because it's like they didn't do the thing where they're like, all right, we got to come up with a good story and then another story after that finishes the story. It's like they just have one story that they're going to tell, and they already knew where they were going to go from the get-go, so you don't have to make any big changes. So I'm positive that based on 2 movies so far, they can have my money for the next one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you feel like this isn't a Matrix 2 and 3 situation where they could have just stopped at 1. I agree with you, by the way.
Or any of Star Wars.
Well,
the last 10 years.
I mean, they put little Easter eggs that make perfect sense with a story from this one in the very first movie, right? Like there's the 42 on the spider, the fact that the spider's glitching. So right from the get-go, you could think, oh, he got his powers because it's from a different dimension. But then you go, oh no, it's going to make it so that these powers never belonged in your dimension and to you. So it's like, if that was their plan all along, which I totally would believe, like they've clearly the story's in good hands. Like they know what they're doing.
Right.
What do you think, Kate? Do you think it's dangerous expectations when you have 2 movies that people like this much, but this is just a continuation? Are you a little at all nervous, or you feel like, nah, they're gonna nail this one?
No, they're gonna stick the landing. 110%. They're gonna stick the landing, because the movies are great because they stand by themselves. But like a comic book, it continues and it keeps going. Like I can enjoy Across the Spider-Verse and I can enjoy Into the Spider-Verse, and they've built off of each other, but they're like Into the Spider-Verse is still a standalone movie, even though it's starting a trilogy. Yeah. In the same way that like A New Hope was a good standalone movie that even started a trilogy. For me, I think the key of it is we've got the little team Into the Spider-Verse, like the kind of like we've dipped our toe in the water. We've now gotten, I think, every iteration of Spider that is possible in Across the Spider-Verse. And I think the key word is beyond. And I think we're going to get more than just spiders, because for me, God, I hope I'm not wrong, because this is going to suck if I'm wrong. I feel like when Sony and Marvel did their negotiations for finishing the Tom Holland trilogy with No Way Home, Sony had to have gotten something back in order for them to make that trade. And I think we're going to see more now that we've gotten a little bit more like live action can infiltrate this universe and animation can infiltrate live action like they should with the Venom thing. My dream is to give Miles Morales the mentor that Spider-Man actually had in the comics. And I want to see Cap in this movie. I want to see it go beyond Spider Society. I want to see the stand like a tree next to the River of Truth scene said to Miles Morales at the because who else is from Brooklyn except for Cap? And so it's like, it has to not affect what Secret Wars has going. It can't affect what Marvel's youth has going on, but they can use characters that have affected the universe that the fans already know in a way that actually, like, that's, I think, what a lot of people were disappointed of in the MCU Spider-Man is Cap was such a big character for Spider-Man, and it was almost replaced with Stark. And I would love to see them go beyond Spider-Man and start bringing in characters adjacent to the Spider-Man canon that affect people who affected Spider-Man beyond Spider-Man. And I think that's where they're going to go.
Yeah, I want to simultaneously talk about how the Spider-Woman, the Jess Drew that we get in this movie is great, but it did make me miss 70s Jessica Drew Spider-Woman. So there's still room for her. She's basically one of the ones that's missing. But Jordan, we already said who I know you would like to see in the next one. I think that. But is there anyone else? Any characters you didn't create that that you're hoping might get a nod?
I don't know. I mean, I think they're absolutely going to stick the landing. I think, like I said, they have already made the #1 and #3 best Spider-Man movies of all time. So I'm sure
What's
the
number
last
2?
one will slide right in there. Spider-Man 2.
Okay.
Yeah, the one with obviously the one with Doc Ock. Yeah, that was my favorite, and then I'm kind
his
of
voice
torn
is
between.
in Across, by the way.
Oh yeah, we get a little
Yes, that
Alfred
was so
Molina.
great.
Yeah, that is nice. Yeah, yeah.
But I think the first Spider-Verse is #1. First Spider-Verse
Yeah.
is #1 in my best Spider-Man movie ever made, in my
I
opinion.
mean, I'm not going to fight with that ranking. I love all those movies, but yeah, Spider-Man 2. For a long time, I would say that was my favorite just superhero movie. But there've been so many since then. It's hard to keep track, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I've got a question. Yeah. Do you think that the 2099 Spider-Man could kind of, his storyline could mirror some of the what was it? I can't remember the Kang's name in Loki. What was the last guy? What
He who
remains.
Yeah.
Could it be like a similar He Who Remains? Well, just the idea that it's like he's saying that there has to be these inflection points, but that could be to weave his Spider-Verse, because it's his like red electric web that we saw as like the web of the Spider-Verse. And it's him who's insisting that these things have to happen for the Spider-Verse to exist. But it's just like when you apply multiversal rules more like your Rick and Morty's, where it's like anything can happen. That's the point. Like literally anything can happen. So whatever happens, the opposite of that can also happen. And it doesn't destroy the universe. It's just an alternate dimension.
I think
I don't know. My hope is like so counter to all this. I want the movie to shrink, and I want it to be like weirdly smaller and more intimate and street level, and I mean keep all the characters, come back to Earth. I think that's what I loved about the first one, is it felt like a great Spider-Man story. We had some multiverse elements, but it still felt all set in New York, you know. And I love this big grand scale adventure we went on in the second one, and all the Spider-Man, all this stuff. But I kind of want it to scope back down, if that makes sense.
What
and
if
like get back to core Spider-Man stuff.
What if it's only Brooklyn across different multiverses? Because what I really loved about the final scene of Across is we were in Brooklyn in different parallel universes. And we were like, we saw 42, we saw 1610, we saw Gwen Stacy's like new version of New York, and they were all bleeding into each other to the point where like it took me until like realizing that Rio's eyes were green that I was like, oh, we're not in the right place. And like, but would that also hit that mark of like, if we have to bleed universes in that way, that it's all Brooklyn, just different multiverses crashing?
Yeah, I think so. I think like, I guess for me, I always like when Spider-Man gets pulled into big, you know, Marvel Universe Secret War stuff, but then I also love that he's still just the guy, you know,
neighborhood
from New York,
Spider-Man.
giving that
Yeah. No, yeah. I agree with Jordan. I love friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Yeah.
It's interesting. There have been times where he's been cosmic Spider-Man. They've, you know, in the film version, obviously he goes off to fight Thanos. He gets a cool suit. But I do like when he's the guy who's worried about paying the rent or Aunt May's hospital bills, or, you know, I really like small. So, yeah, I think that maybe not the next movie, but maybe we will get a small Miles story.
I mean, I think we will.
Well, I think to the point you were making, Kate, like it could be both, right? Because it could be just about Brooklyn, and it could be about all the dimensions in the multiverse at once. And they did set that up potentially in that first one, because that was the whole problem in the first one is, oh, our reality is going to collapse in with other realities, and all these other realities are trying to occupy the same space as ours.
And that's now you have Spot that can just go.
Yeah.
Because my one complaint with the MCU the MCU movies is the first one ends with being like, just kidding, I don't want to be Avenger, I'm better off here, I'm a friendly neighbor Spider-Man. And then the next movie's like, you're part of S.H.I.E.L.D. now, and now you're going to space. And it's like, wait, you just told me he's supposed to stick around here.
Yeah, that's true. I actually didn't think about that till you said
Right.
it.
Well, I guess it's because the guy who told him to stay home died. So he's like, you
Yeah,
can't
fuck
tell me
that.
what to do anymore, jerk.
So now I'm going.
Now I'm an anomaly.
A
Anomalized
burgeoning
it.
multiverse that we could all spend some more time with is a great series from Dark Horse called Minor Threats that Jordan, you did with Patton Oswalt and obviously other great creative types. And it has been the trade paperback is out or it's coming out. I don't want to misrepresent.
No, it's
what's
coming
happening.
out. It actually comes out in July, but we are having some events in LA and New York where people can get it early. So
yes,
on
so in Los
23rd.
Angeles, for our audio listeners, I'll explain. June 21st, that'll be in Eagle Rock. What's the name of the store? I'm missing that somewhere.
It's called Revenge of.
Oh, That's why I didn't get it, because it's actually a pretty great name for a shop.
That's so
Revenge of
cool.
in Eagle Rock. So it'd be you, Patton Oswalt, Scott Hepburn, and there's signing Delicious Barbecue. Come on, who doesn't want to go there? And stand up sets, including Ron Funches and Brian Posehn, and that's for our friends in Los Angeles. But you might be thinking, I live in New York. I really wish that there would be something like that I could go to. Well, good news, everyone. There is. Saturday, June 24th at, I didn't even know there was a Midtown Comics Grand Central. I just knew the other one by Port Authority. But so people can find it there. You guys will be signing. And Jordan, I'll have you know that I'm in New York when you're doing the LA one, and then I'm back in LA when you're doing the New York one. So I'm going to miss both of them. But
man.
I strongly endorse the book.
I
I really enjoyed it. And so for people who don't live in either of those places, they'll be able to, they can probably order the trade paperback of Minor Threats now, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can pre-order it now.
And what's your elevator pitch for people that want to know what the book is? I know the way I would try to sell it, but since you wrote it, I'll let you sell it.
Well, if you like characters like The Spot, it's about those guys, kind of the jobbers, the D-list supervillains who life kind of becomes hellacious for them after an A-list villain kills an A-list hero sidekick, and all these heroes come and crack down, and they can't go about their business. So they decide to go after the A-list villain in hiding and collect the bounty on his head. And it's basically a hell night for supervillains, kind of the Warriors.
Fun.
Yeah. So if
sounds
you like
so
the
fun.
Armadillo and the film The Warriors, you're going to definitely like this. And I like both of those things.
That's our audience.
Really great.
Yeah. It's a very small Venn diagram, but right there is
right in the middle is Minor Threats.
Yeah. So very exciting that people will be able to get to see all of that.
I just hope Patton clinks some bottles on his fingers at the signing.
Come out and play.
Yeah. Good way to get everyone's attention when we're introducing comedians.
Is it like we have to dress up as as like what we would be as a D-list villain?
Oh my gosh.
That would be awesome.
Not like a real one, just like closet cosplay D-list villain.
Yeah. If you ever want to
do that, we'll put him or her in the book.
Done.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Or I'll just come dressed as Turner D. Century either way, because
you can't go. I'm so sad.
Yeah, I'm gonna miss out on two really fun times, but
I'll take notes. I'll do a live podcast.
Yeah, but then it'll be out in July. And anything else coming down the pike? Obviously, there's as a television writer, there's a lot of striking, a lot of writing of signs that is going on. My wife's doing that every day with her sister, and they're out there. But when there's time again where it'll be all right to write, are there any comics coming up, anything, or?
Yeah, well, a lot of TV stuff, film stuff put on hold, but we have the Minor Threats universe is growing. There's going to be some huge announcements at San Diego. We're doing a panel that'll get announced soon. There's going to be merch and fun stuff like that. So we're going to have a big presence at San Diego. And so stay tuned for that. And then I have some more Marvel work, a Venomverse thing coming out this summer as well. A story in one of those books.
And your name is Jordan Blum, but it's spelled Blum Jordan on Instagram. And I think you promoted you have a different social media handle, but I don't remember which one that was.
Oh, I'm on Twitter and Blue Sky and those.
Blue Sky, that was the one. I should have remembered the Jeff Lynne connection. Jeff Duray, you don't want to be found. That still continues to be true.
No,
correct?
Jeff Lynne continues to look for me, and I will have none of it.
He's not going to find you, but we'll see you. We'll see you on the Blackcast. We'll have to talk about when you're going to see the Flash, and we'll plan that sometime in the near future. Kate, where can people find you and your film?
You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and the works at Cornellable, CORNELLABLE. And you can find Uncanny, an X Universe fan film on YouTube and on Instagram. I like it. X-Men were great. I like the X-Men, and I like Marvel. So you should, if you like it, you'll probably like it. If you don't like it, don't let me know.
If you like good stuff, you're gonna like my good stuff.
If you like geek stuff, you'll probably like my geek stuff. But if you don't like my geek stuff, then why are you
keep
here?
it to yourself.
Why are you on the Geekscape Network? Yes,
and learn self-restraint. Internet.
Speaking of the Geekscape Network, you'll be able to find our show at least the next 6 weeks. We'll be covering Secret Invasion, which I believe we'll be doing Wednesdays at 2 Eastern, 11 Pacific. There'll probably be a couple of times where we tweak that time a little bit, but very excited for Secret Invasion, mostly because it's been so long since we've had a Marvel show. I'm ready, I guess is the best way to put that.
You ready?
And as always, I can be found on Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ. Subscribe to my personal podcast, the Blackcast, BLADTCAST. We have a YouTube channel there. This show doesn't live there anymore, but we still do some other shows, and you can find me there, BLADTCAST. That's all the time we have for now, but as the great Stan Lee would say, Excelsior!